Hey Joe, I've set up my 50-30-20 budget based off your recommendation. When and what step do I start to save for a down payment on a house? This is a really good question. We get a lot of people trying to buy their first house, don't know where and when to save for a down payment. So let's go through the steps. Number one, we're going to identify our budget utilizing 50-30-20. 50% goes to non-discretionary expenses, 30% to discretionary, and then 20% goes to setting up emergency fund and then to savings. And so once you identify what your budget is, we work on discretionary expenses to get them aligned to get within budget. And then we start to pay off our credit cards. Once the credit cards are paid off and our debt is reduced in that aspect, then we work on non-discretionary to make sure that our current structure is set up correctly and that we're not overspending so we can reduce it to get within budget. The next thing that we do is we set up an emergency fund, which is 6 months of expenses. After you do that step right there, you can start to save for a down payment. The 20% that you're putting towards savings, you can utilize for a down payment on a house. Eventually, you're going to start to create a savings account, but making sure that you are able to allocate savings for a home, especially if you're spending more money on rent or on expenses, and you can save, and that can be an investment for you. You're not just buying a problem. Some people buy a house, don't realize the expenses that go into it, and they're saving a lot more money renting versus buying, and then they go buy and they're spending a lot more money and then they get out of budget. So it's very key. It's very important that number one is the time is right when you buy a home and that your current situation doesn't warrant staying where you are, even if it means you have to expand. So for instance, let's say you're in a 2-bedroom apartment, you have a new child that you're expecting, or you recently have had a child and you need bigger space. Well, what I would do is find out what it would cost you to rent a 3-bedroom apartment in the general area. It doesn't have to be within your complex, in the general area of where you want to be. Find out what the medium average is for a 3-bedroom, and then look at what it would cost you to buy a home by putting a down payment for a 3-bedroom house. Typically, especially in the market we're in right now, renting is going to save you more money than buying. Because when you buy a home, you're not just buying a home. You're paying a lot more expenses. You're paying maintenance. You're paying costs for lawn care. You're paying taxes, insurance. You're paying a lot of additional expenses outside of your mortgage payment. And so typically, until you're ready to save for a down payment or have a down payment, those are things that you shouldn't even start to consider until we get our budget in line. But you would start to save for a down payment for your home right after we get done saving for an emergency fund.